Can we go ahead and start the housekeeping comments, please?
Thank you for participating in today's meeting. If attending in person, please do not connect to Zoom or teleconference while in the room, and please silence all devices. If translation is provided, click on the globe at the bottom of your screen to select either English or Spanish. Public comment will be taken after each item. If you're in the auditorium and wish to comment, please use the iPads located in the lobby or complete a blue speaker card as available. If you need assistance, please find a South Coast AQMD employee. Speakers may be limited to a total of 3 minutes or less for all agenda items. Times may be shortened to ensure all speakers can be heard. A countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. More time will be allotted for Spanish translation that is not simultaneous. For questions or issues on making a public comment, please call the public advisor at 909-396-2432. That's 909-396-2432. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being removed from the meeting. Be aware that this meeting is being recorded. By participating, you authorize recording of audio and visual content presented during the live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast AQMD.
Thank you, and well, good morning. I'd like to welcome all of you to the Friday, January 17th, 2025 hybrid legislative committee meeting of the South Coast AQMD. Our great staff that's here, our consultants, the public, and my outstanding committee members. Maria, would you please take the roll?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mayor Logdawson? Absent. Supervisor Hagman? Absent. Supervisor Perez? Absent. Councilmember Rahman? Here. Thank you. Councilmember Caccioli?
Here.
We do not have a quorum.
Okay. Wayne, we've got just updates on the first two, on item number one, on two legislative measures. Can we just do that part?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's start with number one, our action discussion items. It's update on South Coast AQMD sponsored state legislative proposal. Lisa Tanaka, Deputy Executive Officer, Legislative Public Affairs and Media. Lisa, go ahead, please.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. This morning, I'm going to provide an update regarding South Coast AQMD's 2025 sponsored state bill proposals. Just as a reminder, the deadline to submit bill requests to Legislative Council in Sacramento is next Friday, January 24th, and the deadline to introduce bills is Friday, February 21st. With that in mind, we're working on cleanup amendments to AB 2851 by Assemblymember Mia Bonta. And just a little background, that bill has to do with fence line monitoring at metal shredding facilities. Last year, we worked with the Assemblymember and others, and we sought amendments to provide an off-ramp for air districts who already had rules in place regarding metal shredders. And despite some initial positive efforts, they did not adopt our amendments, and we ended up issuing a veto letter on the floor. So this year, we're seeking amendments to provide districts who've already had rules in place as of January 1st, 2025, an off-ramp, and also to clarify some language regarding the reimbursement of the costs to implement this bill for local air districts. We've met with Assemblymember Bonta's office, and we were genuinely very optimistic. She has some change in staffing, and they were open to discussing and understood what we had to say about our concerns. Our consultants are also working with Senator Ben Allen's office, who has an interest in metal shredding, as well as Senator Ben Allen and Senator Ana Caballero from the Central Valley. So we're working on amendment language now and discussing this with our fellow air districts, Bay Area and San Joaquin, who would be affected and very much part of the solution. And that's where we are with the Bonta amendments. With regard to the second bill proposal, that has to do with providing compensation for our local air district members who serve on CARB. That bill last year was authored by Assemblymember Lisa Calderon, and we were successful. We got all the way through the Assembly, but the bill got held up in Senate Appropriations. So we are in ongoing discussions with Assemblymember Calderon about her authoring the bill again this year. We're discussing strategies to be successful. And we've already met with some additional members, including our own Assembly Member Jose Solache, who is very supportive. And we met with Senate committee staff to begin the discussions on, how we can get it through appropriations this year. So we'll be working, the bill language will be the same as last year. And we'll be submitting that to Legislative Council shortly. And with that, that's my report. Happy to take any questions.
Lisa, thank you very much. Councilmember Rahman, good morning, and do you have any questions today?
No, both of these sound straightforward, and I don't have any questions. And obviously, with the Assemblymember Bonta bill, we had a discussion on it the last time we heard it. So thank you.
Great. Lisa, just with regard to the other air districts, are they on board with our amendments?
So we're currently in discussion and working together to develop language.
Okay, great. And on the car bill, just if you can tell us, what was the hiccup that got caught in Senate appropriations last year? Are we going to get over that hurdle, or what are your thoughts?
So I think that there was some concern related to CARB that there may have been some committee staff in particular that thought it was a CARB-sponsored bill.
Oh.
And so we have met with them to clarify the purpose of it, and then it's really to support the local air district members on the CARB board.
Okay. Wayne, did you want to offer any other?
I'm going to add a little bit. I think it'll still be very difficult to get this bill passed. There is a view amongst some of the staff that CARB doesn't necessarily reflect the views of the public very well. And so there's a question as to paying board members when so many of the views are of one perspective. So it's going to be difficult. And I just want to be very clear on that. I think it'll be difficult to get it passed, but we're committed to continuing to work with the authors and the members and to try to make right the equity issue.
Thanks, that's important. Thanks a lot. Is there any public comment on this item? I don't see any hands raised. Is anybody in the auditorium want to speak, David? No, Wayne, do you see any, or Susan see any? Okay, great. We'll then move to item number 2, discussion items, update and discussion on federal legislative issues. Number 1, we have Amelia Jenkins with Cassidy. Amelia, are you here?
Chair, I will be covering the report for Cassidy and Associates. It's Leo.
Leo, thanks so very much. Good to see you. Go ahead, please.
Good to see you, Chair, and committee members, Wayne and staff. Monday at noon begins, will be the inauguration and begins the new administration for the President-elect Trump. At that point, we expect the president to begin a series of executive orders. The first one will likely be a regulatory freeze, freezing all new regulations or unfinished regulations that were to be published in the Federal Register. They will also begin a number of enforcement discretions, allowing his administration to put in new personnel to review final regulations, proposed regulations, as well as other executive matters. This regulatory freeze is customary and has been done by presidents of both parties as they look to come in and put in their political appointees. Next week, we'll also see the new Congress start because they will now have control of the House, Senate, and the White House, start a series of Congressional Review Act measures that allow them to overturn federal regulations when they control all branches of government. And they will begin the process of working on the Budget Reconciliation Act. As you may recall, the Budget Reconciliation Act was the tool used to pass the Inflation Reduction Act. It is a 2-step process that allows measures that deal with the federal budget, whether that be spending, revenue, or the debt limit, to be passed on a simple majority vote with an expedited nature. those discussions will begin in earnest next week and will likely go into February. Again, this is a two-step process. The first step is agreeing on a budget resolution that will set the spending parameters for the year, as well as instruct committees to draft legislation that will meet a key number of budget-related instructions that the committees will then work through April to try to get a bill to the president's desk by the Easter recess. Although that timeline is very ambitious and unlikely, we will be closely monitoring it as it will impact a number of AQMD priorities. And with that, I will yield back for questions or comments.
Thanks, Leo. We'll go through all the federal consultants first and then come back for questions. Ben, welcome. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. I'm Ben Miller with Kadish and Associates. I hope you and your friends and family are safe. I know we're all thinking about you all out there. As Leo mentioned, the new Congress has convened, and so the members of the South Coast congressional delegation are starting to get their committee assignments. And so we have some familiar faces and also some new roles and some new members. So Senator Alex Padilla and Adam Schiff now both serve on the Committee on Environment and Public Works, which has jurisdiction over air pollution in the EPA. Senator Padilla is going to remain on the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources, which has jurisdiction over Department of Energy, as well as public lands. And then over in the House, Representatives Laura Friedman and Robert Garcia were both new appointments to the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. So that gives California and the South Coast Basin many seats now overall, statewide at least. Congressman Mike Levin, also from the region, has joined the House Committee on Appropriations, which is the funding committee in the House. And he will sit on the subcommittee on energy and water with jurisdiction over energy, as you might expect. Congressman Ken Calvert in the majority is remaining on the committee and also serves on that same subcommittee. And then we have two other House members from the region remaining on the committee, Pete Aguilar and Norma Torres. They both sit on the subcommittee funding transportation. Over at the Energy and Commerce Committee, the authorizing committee for most of the issues that we work on, Congressman Jay Obernolte, Republican in the majority, and Nanette Barragan and Raul Ruiz are both remaining on that committee. Those are all the immediately relevant appointments over the last week or two. So happy to take any questions or comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. We'll wrap up with Gary. Gary, welcome and good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. I'd like to report today on several of the confirmation hearings that happened this week on the new Trump nominees coming in. You may have seen there were a total of 12 hearings this week, and we focused specifically on the ones that we're most interested in. And I'd like to start with the three that we're focused on mostly, which is EPA, Lee Zeldin, DOT, Sean Duffy, another former congressman, and Department of Energy, Chris Wright, the energy CEO that's up for that one. And I would just say generally that all of these nominees came in well prepared. They had met previously with all the members on both sides of the aisle in these committees, and these were very, for the most part, non-contentious hearings. It's a foregone conclusion that all three of these are going to be confirmed with the Republican majority, and I think all of them are going to get significant bipartisan support. There were no specifics that I could point to where they try to avoid specifics on regulatory cuts, budget cuts, staff cuts, all these things we're looking at. When some of these nominees were pressed on specific issues like climate change, California waivers, IRA cuts, bipartisan infrastructure law, clawbacks, regulatory repeals, they were very effective at sort of deflecting these questions as best they could. And they basically all said in the end, they had like a set line that they would say, I'm here to follow the law. So when it came like to California waivers, Senator Padilla in particular pressed Zeldin specifically on that, and he basically said he understood the issue, but he just said, I'm going to follow the law on it. So that was the sort of the way it went. Just a couple other notes of color. I think Senator Padilla specifically pressed Zeldin on non-attainment issues and helping California avoid some of the penalties that might come from wildfires and other things. And Zeldin was very solicitous to him and said he agreed. He said he basically got Zeldin to agree that federal regulations were needed to deal with mobile sources, which I thought was very interesting, and basically said that he would be a common sense administrator and be pragmatic about things. And he was very solicitous of all the members and all of their concerns. Duffy was the same way. He was a former congressman, and he was just asking what each member wanted, and he tried to help. And Wright from Energy is a very engaging guy, very non-ideological, but very into the weeds of energy issues. And Padilla pressed him on the DOE labs and whether they would publish their reports, and he said they would. So that was good. The only other quickly hearing that I wanted to mention was the OMB administrator. Russ Vogt is up for that. He worked in the Trump administration at the same position. That was a much more contentious hearing. Democrats were lined up against him. They claimed that he had violated the law in the previous administration. There was a big discussion about the Impoundment Act and whether he had authority to withhold funds that were appropriated. And he sort of indicated he thought he did, and he thought the Impoundment Act was unconstitutional. So that developed a big contentious thing. So the Democrats are going to be lined up against him, but in the end, he will be confirmed as well. So I'll just leave it there. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Councilmember Rahman, any questions? Seeing you nod your head, no. Wayne, is Manny on yet, or any of the other committee members? Do you see them?
We haven't seen them on screen. Supervisor Perez, are you present?
Okay. That's fine. I have no questions. Is there any public comment?
There are no hands raised. I'm sorry. Mr. Etter just raised his hand.
Great. Harvey, go ahead, please. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning. Am I being heard?
Yes, good morning, Harvey, and welcome. You are being heard.
Thank you. My name's Harvey Etter. I'm talking for myself, Public Solar Power Coalition, and like-minded folk and entities. I tried to make comments about the state stuff, but anyway. So in reference to questions about equity coming up, it was under state, but I think it's under federal as well. I'd like to incorporate that Professor Robert Reich, who was Secretary of Labor under Clinton, and it's been 18 years at the policy and teaching public policy at UC Berkeley. He has a coffee clutch, and it's like every week, and he talks about current stuff. And he's just completed 14 units of a class that he taught on income and wealth. Okay, about an hour and a half each. It's educational as all get out. It's excellent. So I want to incorporate that in the record and tell people to the record. So what I think what's happening now with this federal legislation and everything, you guys got the inside track, and I think there's still a fight to be made here. Okay, that Smith has disengaged, and under the 14th Amendment there was the 1870 Enforcement Act. And we commented on this on Washington Journal on the 6th, and we had half of it cut off, and we're incorporating that reference 43 through 54 minutes. Okay, that's C-SPAN's national talk show. Okay, including that we tried to stir up stuff with Trump because and went to the Ninth Circuit and 5 different Congress people and tried to get this stuff. I heard Trump lying about trying to get 11,000 votes and all this, like a mob boss. This stuff was cut off. Okay, this is extreme. Okay, so there's got to be right now they blamed it. There's the Constitution Center, okay, and they do our stuff on this to educate people nonpartisan about the Constitution. And they had a guy from Standard Heritage and a guy from University of Maryland, Garber, and they both said that it was garbage. What the Supreme Court said, they were trying to avoid chaos. We got chaos now. All right, that's it. And there was basically terrorist threat. 25th Amendment to wipe all of this stuff. If you don't like it, it doesn't have to be violent. The head of this committee, unless the opposition wants it to be. Enough, okay? So this has got to be stopped. Somebody, independence, okay? Defense of necessity, this entity should challenge that now. And the report's 137 pages, and this was in 1870, they said that Ron's responsibility had actually gone to the Democrats under justice. They should have been able to take him out off the ballots because of violation of the 14th Amendment, Section 3, like the rebels after the Civil War, okay? Enough. It's got to be challenged now. We can't let this.
Thank you, Harvey. That concludes your statements. And I see no more hands raised and no one in the auditorium.
Chair?
Yes.
We want to acknowledge Supervisor Perez is on.
Oh, welcome Supervisor Perez. Thank you. Supervisor,
you.
you just went over the federal legislative update. Do you have any questions for the consultants at all?
No, I'll save it.
Okay, then we'll move on to the state legislative issues. We'll begin with, that's next item on our agenda, number 3. We'll begin with Ross Buckley. Ross, go ahead, please, and welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. One of the most significant dates in January every year is when the governor's deadline to submit his proposed budget proposal to the legislature. This year, that deadline was on January 10th. But however, due to travel commitments and then ultimately the Southern California wildfires, Newsom presented a top-line budget proposal last Monday and then let his Department of Finance director submit the more detailed proposal on Friday. The governor is ultimately proposing a $322.2 billion general balanced budget. That includes $228.9 billion in general fund spending with $16.9 billion in reserves. One of the highlights of the governor's budget proposal is that the state is actually expecting $16.5 billion of additional revenue that we were not forecasting in the last budget. However, when you look at state commitments primarily around the Prop 98 guarantee and programmatic spending and then the reserve payments, that actually only translates to about a $363 million discretionary surplus. So that could be money for new programs or new issues that the state might want to tackle. For South Coast, I also did want to highlight that the budget continues the $250 million AB 617 spending. This is part of the multi-year, the 2 budget year deal that they struck last year to address the shortfall in last year and this year. That was part of that commitment. I also wanted to note that the Independent Legislative Analyst Office, they actually project a $2 billion deficit. Now they take a different view on revenues, and that's part of the budget process is they don't want to necessarily agree with the Department of Finance. So it's not unusual that they disagree. And actually they disagree by not that much compared to previous years where they've had differences of upwards of tens to 20 billions of dollars. So just want to note that. So we will continue to monitor revenues, particularly as we move through this early part of the year. The budget will likely need to be flexible as we address the wildfires that are happening in Southern California. Additionally, the governor's Department of Finance did note that, rightfully so, and as part of some of the relief that we provide residents in any catastrophes, we allow tax reporting to be delayed. But the Department of Finance did note that has also caused some uncertainty when we craft budgets. So that'll be another factor that we will have to monitor as we move through the next part of this year. But that completes my verbal report, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ross. We'll move on to our next state legislative consultant, Paul Gonzalez. Paul, go ahead, please.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Wayne.
Supervisor Perez had his hand raised.
Sorry, Supervisor, go ahead, please.
Can you repeat those numbers, Ross, for the beginning as far as the budget's concerned? How much was passed? All those you kind of lined them all up. I just want to get
Yeah,
that?
so it's $322.2 billion is the overall budget the governor is proposing. That includes $228.9 billion in general fund spending, and that includes $19.9 billion or $16.9 billion in reserves.
Okay. And is the state running a deficit or is there a surplus still?
The governor is expecting a $16.5 billion surplus of addition. So it's not surplus; it's additional revenue that we weren't expecting. But that surplus is quite small when it comes to the discretionary part, and that's the $363 million part.
Okay. You mentioned as well that potentially we're going to fund new programs. This is somewhere, this is something I think that we need to be mindful of as AQMD, and I know you mentioned it, 617, which I guess we're finally going to get some funding. But how about the programs that already exist that are underfunded or are no longer funded? Like the outreach workers, for example, that are out there to increase Medi-Cal inscription, if you will, or making sure that people have Medis and making sure they have access to healthcare and that they're signed up, those outreach workers or anything else, AQMD, obviously with our 617. But I just don't think that we ought to be funding new programs when we're underfunding those that currently exist. So just want to put that out there for us to consider later on. All right, I'm done.
Thank you, Supervisor. We'll move on to Paul Gonzalez. Paul, go ahead, please.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. I'd like to provide the committee with a few updates on the new legislative committee assignments and leadership posts that were announced just before the new year. This Assembly Speaker Robert Rivas announced the new Assembly Committee chairs and leadership appointments. And normally around this time, the full makeup of the committees would have been already announced. However, due to the devastating wildfires in Southern California, that announcement has obviously been delayed. So with that said, I do want to highlight some of the new Assembly Committee chairs of interest to the district, starting with Assemblymember Jesse Gabriel, who remains chair of the Assembly Budget Committee. Assemblymember Steve Bennett will remain the chair of the Assembly Budget Subcommittee number 4 on climate crisis, resources, energy, and transportation. Assemblymember Damon Connolly from the Bay Area is the new chair of the Assembly Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee. Assemblymember Jackie Irwin is the new chair of the Joint Legislative Committee on Climate Change Policies. Assemblymember Isaac Bryant remains the chair of the Assembly Natural Resources Committee. Assemblymember Lori Wilson will remain the chair of the Transportation Committee. And additionally, Assemblymember Cotty Petrie Norris will remain chair of the Assembly Utilities and Energy Committee. In addition to the chairs announced by the Speaker, he also announced his new leadership team. Assemblymember Cecilia Aguiar Curry is the Assembly Majority Leader, excuse me. Assemblymember Josh Lowenthal is the Assembly Speaker Pro Tem. Assemblymember Celeste Rodriguez is the Assistant Speaker Pro Tem. And Assemblymember Robert Garcia is the Assistant Majority Leader. Moving on to the Senate, Senate President Pro Tem Mike McGuire announced on January 3rd the Senate Committee's memberships assignments and the Democratic leadership team in the Senate. The leadership team includes Senator Lena Gonzalez as the Senate Majority Leader, Senator Angelique Ashby from Sacramento, and Senator Aisha Wahab are the Senate Assistant Majority Leaders, and Senator Monique Limon is the Senate Democratic Caucus Chair. Now moving on to the full makeups of the Senate committees. A lot of these committees have 18, 16, 15 members. I'm not going to read all of them off to you. It will take quite a bit of time, but in the Senate Budget and Fiscal Review Committee, there's 18 members. The chair is Senator Scott Wiener from San Francisco. Of those 18 members, 9 of those members are in the jurisdiction of South Coast Air Quality Management District. So we'll have about a 50% representation on that committee. In the Senate Budget Subcommittee number 2 on Resources, Environmental Protection, and Energy, There's 4 members, 2 of them are from the South Coast area. The chair, Senator Ben Allen, and new Senator Stephen Choi from Irvine. The Senate Energy, Utilities, and Communications Committee has 16 members. The chair is Josh Becker from Menlo Park, the Bay Area. Of those 16, 6 are from the South Coast region. The Senate Environmental Quality Committee has 8 members. Excuse me. The chair is Senator Catherine Blakespear. She's the new chair of the committee. And of the 8, 4 are in the South Coast region. Then you have Senate Natural Resources and Water. There's 7 members on that committee. Senator Monique Limon from Santa Barbara is the chair. And of the 7, about 3 are from the South Coast region. And then you have the Transportation Committee. Senator Dave Cortese from San Jose is the chair of the committee, and we'll have 8 representatives on that committee from the South Coast region. So once the Assembly releases the full makeup of their committees, we're going to be sure to provide that information to you and your staff. But with that, Mr. Chair, that completes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Looks like Supervisor Perez may have a question for you.
I just wondering, you mentioned the chair of a committee, I think it was, did you say climate change?
Yes, Jackie Irwin, the Select Committee on the Joint Committee on Climate Change.
Okay, there's a select committee on that. How long has that been going on now? You know?
I believe 2 or 3 years. But it's been a few years that it's been going on.
Can you provide us any type of background information over the course of the last few years that they existed? And I don't know, any type of issues that they got into regarding climate change, anything that's written by the Legislative Analyst's Office, maybe any type of legislation that might have came out of that committee, whatever you can kind of just gather up, I think would be helpful for us, for me specifically as the climate change chair here for the AQMD, but I think that would be helpful overall. We can just kind of just put something together, whatever you find, and bring it forward. That'd be helpful. Send it to us. And then you talked about the fires, right? Look, yeah, so obviously we want to be helpful and supportive of everything that's going on in LA. That's for sure, because it's just devastating. And obviously we have even our own colleague Gideon who suffered a loss, meaning his home. And we need to do everything we can to be helpful and supportive. But let's be mindful of the fact that there's natural disasters that have actually taken place before, and that will continue to take place in other areas, whether it be Ventura, whether it be in my neck of the woods, or anywhere else, and ensure that ultimately there is equity, if you will. I'm not saying that we shouldn't support LA. Let's fully support them as much as we possibly can. But let's not forget those other areas outside of LA that also need that help and that support. I mean, there's still areas right now in which homes are not even built yet, and things of that nature, right? Because of lack of funding. And I know that everyone's mobilizing to be helpful to LA, and that's great, and we need to. But let's just make sure we think about the entire state of California when it comes to that front. Just want to put that out there, and especially when we talk about air quality. All right, thanks.
Absolutely. And Supervisor Perez, I will get that report over to Wayne and the team and make sure they get that to you here shortly.
Thanks, Paul. We'll go to our final speaker on state legislative issues, David Quintana. David, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, committee. I would like to add something to my report, and that is that, as you know, in early November, the governor called a special session on what has been called Trump proofing. The state, essentially what that came out to was the idea was to allocate $50 million, $25 million for legal funds for potential lawsuits, and $25 million for immigration services. On Monday, that special session was expanded to also include disaster aid recovery and boosting response due to the fires that are occurring right now in Southern California. The initial idea under the Trump proofing, I'm just using the word that's been used in the media, or the term. The initial idea was to have those bills heard at the beginning of this week, get them signed by the governor at the end of this week, and that so that they were in place by the time of before the swearing in. Once on Monday, when the governor expanded the special session, the legislature canceled the hearings because I think they believed there was not enough time to put all of that legislation together. And so they delayed the hearings. The new calendar is that the hearings will begin on January 22nd. Or the budget committee will meet on January 22nd, and the idea is to get all of those bills to the governor by January 27th. The response and recovery efforts will be $2.5 billion, and $1.5 billion of that will be pulled from Proposition 4, and $1 billion of that will be pulled from the existing state funding. There was one issue in that the Senate had initially said that the Trump bills would be in the same pieces of legislation that the disaster aid bills would be, thereby putting some people in a tough position, having to, go up or go down on both issues in the same bill. That became a bone of contention in the middle of this week. 2 days ago, the governor said no. The legislation will be separate. The fire bills will be in one piece of legislation, or, they're separate bills. And then the bills on immigration services and legal funds for lawsuits will be in their own bills. So those have now been separated. They will be separate bills. They won't be tied. And that is what I have, Chairman.
Thank you, David, very much.
Hmm.
Members, any questions for Mr. Quintana?
Yes, I had a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted some clarity about the Prop 4 funding. You just moved kind of quickly through that, and so I missed it. What is the Prop 4 funding being brought forward for?
Yeah,
and how is it being utilized? I'm sorry, I just didn't, I couldn't follow what you were saying.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize for that. The governor has decided he's going to take 1.5 billion from the climate bond that was passed by the voters, and he is going to use that. I do have a table. They have not been very clear on which parts that will come out, but I have written something up on where we believe it's going to come from. So he is pulling that forward from the climate bond.
For use
for again, not clear on which specific buckets that will go into, but it'll go to boost the response and the recovery efforts.
So okay, got it.
For the fires.
And any written materials or clarification that you have about, what funding buckets this is being taken from and what it's potentially usable for, I think would be very helpful for us.
Yeah, and if I can add that, let me just add a little bit of just a tiny bit of more specificity to that. He has said very clearly that the climate bond money will be used for disaster preparedness coming out of the fire. So just a bit of specificity there, but I can absolutely get you more info.
That disaster preparedness covers, I think, a wide range of potential activities. And again, just as someone who's looking forward to rebuilding the city, but also making the city more resilient. I'm very curious about what we would be able to utilize these dollars for and how we can ensure that we're getting those dollars to work as quickly as possible. So that specificity would be much appreciated.
Thank you.
Supervisor, do you have a question also?
Just very quickly on a personal friendship level. I saw the cross back there behind you, David.
You know where that's from?
Yeah, been a while, man. Just want to say hi. You and Pilar, please say hello to Pilar, please.
Thank you. I'm glad you noticed it.
I saw it right now. I was like, wow, it looks really nice. Thanks for putting it up.
Thank you.
Committee members, any more questions for our state legislative consultants? Seeing none, is there any public comment, Wayne?
Mr. Etter has his hand raised. However, he used his 3-minute allotment, so he no longer has any time. His next opportunity will be at the public comment.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. And nobody in the auditorium for public comment I see coming forward. So we'll move on to the next item. Other matters. Is there any other business, committee members, staff? Seen everybody shaking their head no. We'll move to item number 6 on our agenda, public comment period. There's a chance to comment on items that were not on our agenda but do come under the purview of the legislative committee. You have a moment to raise your hands, and anybody in the auditorium can come forward for a public comment. We're at the sites with the council member in Los Angeles and supervisor in Riverside. Nobody at those locations, no one here to speak. Anybody want to raise their hand? Wayne?
Mr. Etter?
Harvey, you've got, is it 3 minutes, Wayne? 3 minutes, thank you, Barbara. Go ahead, Harvey.
Hello, am I being heard? Yes?
Yes, Harvey, go ahead, please.
Good morning. I'm Harvey Etter. I'm speaking for myself, for PSPC, etc. I'm going to try to hit 3 things if I can. Okay, I about the fires and whatnot that are going on. They had a meeting in Santa Monica a few months ago with the LA Fire Department and our fire department coordinating for emergencies. And I brought up then, and I brought up on the record here, and I brought up at the meeting, at the board meeting last week, that we're overdue for a major earthquake. And San Francisco in 2009 burnt to the ground. They just put in gas lines. The city burnt to the ground, all right? So we saw that here, and especially with the winds in these conditions, this could be a trifecta, you know. It's still on deck. It was 1857, 8.3, and Fort Tejon were way overdue, and that's severe. Okay, so, and placing water and stuff to put out, this is all part of rebuilding and equitable solar conversion, okay? So, okay, in the current, I want to talk, one thing I want to say about Karl Marx. There's a lot of anti-Semitism going. Karl Marx was Hebrew. He came from 6 generations of rabbis. His father had to convert to Christianity to practice law. Okay.
Mr. Etter, the subject is matters within the purview of the legislative committee. Could you direct your comments to that issue? Thank you.
Harvey, go ahead. You have 1 minute, 35 seconds, but as the attorney said, please keep within the purview of legislative committee. Go ahead.
Okay. There is a member here. Rahman is a member of Democratic Socialists of America. I'm incorporating by reference. Last Thursday's issue had an article in there, Democratic Socialists of America, better a world for everyone except the Jews. 2 pages. Okay, they are having people that are running for office, including this board and all the groups that go with it, and having them saying that they have nothing
Okay,
to do with
I think we can go ahead
That's
now.
political.
Cut off the comment.
Thank you, Ms. Baird. Any more public comment? I see no more hands raised online. Wayne says no. Nobody in the auditorium. Move on to our final item. Their next meeting is February 14th, 2025, Valentine's Day. And we will now adjourn this meeting. Everybody have a great weekend. See you at the next meeting.